Modesto, California, in the winter of 2002. A town of quiet suburban dreams where the life of Laci and Scott Peterson seemed to embody the quintessential American story. Laci, a vibrant, kind-hearted substitute teacher, was just 27 years old. Scott, a salesman for a fertilizer company, was a handsome and charming figure. Their home was a haven of domestic bliss, and their future was perfectly mapped out. They were expecting their first child, a son they had already named Connor, due in just over a month. The nursery was decorated, the Christmas tree was up. Every detail of their life was a testament to the beautiful, happy future they were building together. From the outside, their life was a picture of absolute perfection. But what the world saw was just a facade, and on the eve of Christmas, that facade would begin to crumble in the most horrifying way imaginable. It was Christmas Eve. According to Scott Peterson's own account, he saw his wife Laci for the last time around 9:30 a.m. He claimed to have left their home to go on a solo fishing trip in his newly purchased boat. Laci, he said, was planning a low-key day of last-minute errands and walking their dog, Mackenzie. She was due to see her parents later that day for dinner, but she never showed up. When Scott returned home that afternoon, there was an unnerving silence. The doors were unlocked. Laci's purse, car keys, and wallet were all still inside. A half-eaten bowl of cereal sat on the kitchen counter, untouched. The most unsettling detail, however, was Mackenzie, the golden retriever, who was found in the backyard with his leash still on, a clear sign that Laci had begun their walk but had never returned. It was Laci's stepfather who made the initial call to the police after 6 p.m. to report her missing. What followed was a massive, immediate search effort. But as a community rallied to search for Laci and her unborn child, a sense of unease began to grow around the seemingly grieving husband. He appeared distant and emotionless in interviews, a stark contrast to the heartbroken family and friends surrounding him. The nation, watching on television, began to ask the most chilling question. Was the grieving husband a heartbroken man, or was he something far more sinister? The more Scott spoke, the more inconsistencies in his story began to emerge. Initially, he told Laci's family he was golfing that morning, only to later change his story to a solo fishing trip. His destination was the Berkeley Marina, a location 2 hours away from his home, a place he had no prior history of fishing. Furthermore, it was revealed that he had purchased the boat with cash just 2 weeks earlier, a detail that seemed to hint at a premeditated plan. As the investigation deepened, more damning facts came to light. Scott was seen selling Laci's Land Rover and trying to sell their house in the weeks following her disappearance, actions that a loving husband praying for his wife's return would likely not take. The public began to see not a grieving widower, but a man preparing to liquidate his life and move on. The case was thrown into a shocking new light when a woman named Amber Frey came forward. She was a single mother and a massage therapist who had been in a romantic relationship with Scott. He had told her that he was a widower and that Laci had been dead for months. When Amber saw Laci's face on the news, she immediately went to the police. In a pivotal moment for the investigation, she agreed to cooperate, secretly recording phone calls with Scott at the direction of law enforcement. These conversations, full of Scott's calculated lies and evasions, became a powerful and devastating piece of evidence for the prosecution. They revealed that Scott had a clear motive. He wanted out of his marriage and out of his impending fatherhood. The affair with Amber Frey painted a dark picture of a man who was not only unfaithful, but was living a carefully constructed double life. For months, the search for Laci and Connor continued, an agonizing ordeal for her family and the nation watching. Then, in a final and devastating twist of fate, the bodies were found. On April 13th and 14th, 2003, a little over 4 months after her disappearance, the partial remains of Laci Peterson and her unborn son, Connor, washed ashore in the San Francisco Bay. The location was a crucial and chilling detail. They were found just a few miles from the very spot where Scott Peterson claimed to have been fishing on that fateful Christmas Eve. While the bodies were too decomposed to determine the exact cause of death, the geographical proximity and the sheer improbability of the location's coincidence became the circumstantial linchpin of the entire case against Scott. Just days after the remains were identified, police arrested Scott Peterson in La Jolla, California. He had a new look, his hair dyed blonde, a new goatee, and a suspicious collection of items in his car, including multiple cell phones and camping gear. It appeared to investigators that he was preparing to flee to Mexico. The trial that followed was a media spectacle, captivating millions of Americans. The prosecution, lacking a direct confession or a murder weapon, meticulously presented their case of circumstantial evidence centering on Scott's lies, his affair with Amber Frey, and the location of the bodies. The defense, meanwhile, argued that the case was a classic rush to judgment and that Scott was the victim of a media frenzy, but the jury was swayed by the weight of the evidence. After a long deliberation, they found Scott Peterson guilty of the first-degree murder of Laci and the second-degree murder of Connor. He was initially sentenced to death, a sentence that was later overturned in 2020. However, the verdict stood, and he remains in prison, continuing to profess his innocence. The case of the seemingly perfect couple from Modesto has become a permanent fixture in the American consciousness, a haunting true crime story that still generates debate. It's a story of how a picture-perfect life can harbor the darkest of secrets, and how a family's joy can be stolen in an instant, leaving behind only questions and a legacy of profound heartbreak.